It was 11:43 p.m. when I realized I couldn't take it anymore. I'd been lying there in the dark, flat on my back in my bed, listening to the rhythmic creak of the ceiling fan above me. Same tempo, same hum, same whisper of wind brushing against the sheets like a ghost of what used to be. It wasn't the first night I'd struggled to sleep since everything fell apart, but this one felt different. Like I had crossed some invisible threshold where memory stopped being painful and started becoming venomous. The apartment was too quiet. The kind of silence that presses on your chest like a weighted blanket, soaked in regret. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the pillow beside me, sweet and maddening. Some overpriced lilac-scented concoction she used to dab on her wrists before heading out. I used to think it was for me. Now I knew better. I'd left the closet door open again, like a wound in the wall that never fully closed. Half her things were still there, though the hanger count had definitely thinned. She hadn't taken everything. Not yet, but just enough to remind me she had someone else waiting for her at the other end of whatever road she'd chosen. The road that didn't include me. A sudden heat surged up my spine, twisting in my gut. I kicked off the sheets and swung my legs over the side of the bed. My feet hit the hard wood like fists, and I stood before my own reflection in the mirror on the closet door. I didn't even recognize the man staring back, stubble thicker than it should be, eyes bloodshot, mouth hard set like a man always 5 seconds away from screaming. This was what betrayal looked like in the mirror. I tried to remind myself it had only been 2 weeks since I found out. Only 2 weeks since I saw the messages. That first innocent little, can't stop thinking about yesterday, winky face, on her lock screen while she showered. I remember the sick feeling rising in my throat when I unlocked her phone, as if my own hands were betraying me just by touching it. The texts weren't just sexual, they were familiar. Laughs, memories. Next time let's do it in the shower, winky face. It was emotional, deep. Something that made me realize I'd been pushed out of the center of her life and replaced by someone who hadn't earned it. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat on the edge of the bed with her shoulders slouched, like it was a conversation about bills or vacation plans. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. I think that's what broke me the most. How casually she said it. Like she'd stepped on my foot in line at the grocery store. Oops. Sorry. I blinked myself back into the present and grabbed my laptop bag from the desk. No way I was staying in this bed tonight, or this apartment, with its choking familiarity. I needed distance, movement, purpose. Even if that purpose was just pretending to be busy, pretending to care about something besides the gaping hole she'd left in me. The city was still alive outside, humming with late-night deliveries and pulsing streetlights, the occasional car hissing by like a sigh. I threw on jeans, a hoodie, didn't even bother with socks. As I pulled the door closed behind me, I noticed I hadn't turned off the lamp in the living room. It cast a soft glow over the framed photos on the mantel. Our wedding picture was still front and center. She looked radiant in that picture. Not just because of the dress, the makeup, the bouquet, but because of the way she looked at me. Like I was the only man in the world. I left it there. Maybe to torture myself. Maybe because I couldn't bring myself to admit that the man in that photo no longer existed. My office was 20 blocks downtown. The building was old, but familiar. And unlike my apartment, it didn't echo with the sounds of love rotting on the vine. The night security guard nodded at me as I entered. He didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. I'd shown up late like this a few times over the past week, always with the same excuse: project deadlines. Important revisions. The truth was simpler. I just didn't want to sleep alone in the home we built together. Or worse, sleep in a place that was haunted by what we used to be. The elevator hummed as it carried me up to the 14th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into the quiet hum of artificial lighting and stale coffee-scented air. The buzz of the HVAC system. The gentle thrum of electricity flowing through wires, walls, and machines. It was strange how comforting it was. How this sterile place, built for spreadsheets, status meetings, and quarterly performance reviews, felt more like home now than the one with our names still on the lease. I dropped my bag on my desk and stared out the window. The skyline shimmered, alive in neon and sodium vapor golds. A city that never sleeps, and right now, neither could I. My office felt like a cocoon. Not warm, not inviting, but insulated from the pain. Here, I could forget for a little while. Here, I wasn't the man whose wife had whispered someone else's name in a text thread laced with desire. I was just another suit with a deadline. I told myself I came to work, that I was here to catch up on that proposal, finish those reports, update the client feedback log. But as I powered on my laptop and stared at the blank screen, I realized the truth. I came here because I couldn't stand the silence of that empty apartment. Because I couldn't face that goddamn wedding photo again. Because being surrounded by glowing monitors and empty desks and the occasional flickering overhead light made me feel less alone than the home I used to share with the woman I thought I'd grow old with. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting toward the hallway that led to the corner offices. A soft blue glow leaked from under one of the doors, my boss's office, if I wasn't mistaken. That was odd. This late. I frowned. Then again, I wasn't the only one avoiding their demons tonight. I closed my eyes for a second and let the silence wrap around me. Tomorrow, maybe, I'd figure out how to sleep in that bed again. But tonight, the office was my refuge. And I wasn't alone after all. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That soft, bluish light spilling from the office at the far end of the hallway, the one with floor-to-ceiling glass, just beyond the conference room, wasn't supposed to be there. At this hour, the building usually slept with the city. A few cleaners, maybe maintenance on a good night. But not her. Not Vivian Hale, our division VP. Not at nearly 1 in the morning. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if it was just a screen left on, some sleep mode glow stretching beyond the blinds. But then I saw movement. A shadow shift behind the frosted glass. A figure pacing. Curiosity stirred in me, quiet but insistent. Maybe it was just professional curiosity, the kind that notices a boss working absurd hours and wonders if the company's in trouble. Or maybe it was something more primal. I didn't know yet. All I knew was that I wasn't the only one running from something tonight. I stood and walked slowly down the corridor, passing empty cubicles, long-abandoned workstations, and that one whiteboard someone forgot to erase that still said Q3 Pipeline Review, crush it, in red marker. When I reached the office, I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before I touched it. Vivian stood there barefoot, her heels in one hand, blouse untucked, and her reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun that had mostly fallen apart, and a single strand had curled along her cheekbone, glinting in the office light. She wasn't the Ice Queen executive I saw every morning barking instructions from across the table. Right now, she looked human, tired, disarmed. Well, she said, arching one elegant brow. Didn't think I'd find another insomniac here. Behind her, sitting on the couch with a half-finished folder on her lap, was Sophie, her assistant. Younger, with that natural redhead energy and a body that always seemed coiled like a spring, Sophie looked up with a smirk. Hey, she said casually. Thought we were the only ones dumb enough to work past midnight. I tried to smile, but it probably came out closer to a grimace. Didn't expect company. Vivian stepped aside without a word and motioned me in. Her bare feet padded silently across the carpet as she returned to her desk. We're finalizing the Baxter proposal, she explained. The deadline moved. Of course. Of course, I echoed, settling into the guest chair opposite her. Sophie didn't look away, still watching me with a tilt of the head that felt more like assessment than interest. You come here often? She asked, amusement lacing her voice. You've been popping in after hours all week. I stiffened slightly. So they had noticed. Just trying to stay ahead of the backlog, I lied. Vivian said nothing. Just kept typing, her long fingers dancing over the keys with mechanical precision. But I noticed her pause a second too long before hitting enter. Her jaw clenched. She knew I was lying. And I had the odd feeling she wasn't going to call me on it. We sat in a comfortable triangle of silence, broken only by the soft tapping of keys, the rustling of paper, and the occasional sigh from Sophie as she flipped a page. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. In fact, it was warm. Not physically, not in temperature. The office was still bathed in sterile LED light, but in energy. I cleared my throat. I could grab coffee. There's some left in the break room. Vivian leaned back, stretched, and then looked me directly in the eyes for the first time. Her gaze was intense, steady, but there was a softness buried beneath it. Something rare, something real. Only if it's not that burnt sludge from this morning. I made a fresh pot when I got in, I said. Didn't think anyone else would want some. Then yes, she replied. Make it 3 cups. By the time I returned with the mugs, the atmosphere had shifted. Sophie had moved closer to Vivian's desk, one leg tucked under her, her laughter filling the space as Vivian recounted a story about a past client who'd once tried to pay for a multi-million-dollar deal using cryptocurrency he couldn't explain. The tension that always clung to our professional lives had been stripped away by the late hour, the quiet, and maybe the shared understanding that we were all here because we didn't want to be anywhere else. I passed them their mugs, and for a few minutes, the three of us just talked. About projects, timelines, how the Baxter account was going to eat the next 2 weeks of our lives. But gradually, the conversation drifted. What about you? Sophie asked, turning toward me with that same curious smirk. You always stay this late because of spreadsheets and deadlines. I hesitated. Something like that. She studied me, her lips parting like she wanted to push further, but Vivian's voice cut through the moment, quieter, lower, almost conspiratorial. Some people stay late because it's easier than going home. That landed in the air like a stone in water, sending ripples that no one acknowledged aloud. Sophie glanced at me. Vivian didn't look up from her mug. The silence stretched just long enough to sting. I could have played it off, laughed, redirected, but I didn't. Instead, I murmured, yeah. That one word felt heavier than a confession. I didn't elaborate, and neither of them asked for more. Instead, Sophie gave me a nod that felt like recognition, a silent handshake between broken people. Vivian just sipped her coffee and closed the laptop with a soft click. You know, she said, standing and crossing to the window. When I first took this job, I told myself I'd never become one of those people who stayed until 2 a.m. to avoid their real life. She looked over her shoulder at me. Funny how fast that changes. I joined her at the window. From here, the city looked like a circuit board, grids of light blinking beneath the dark velvet sky, a million people moving through their own private stories. I wondered how many of them were running from something, like us. You ever feel like this place has its own heartbeat? I asked. Vivian's lips curled slightly. Only at night. During the day, it just screams. I felt Sophie step closer behind us, her presence warm, familiar now. The three of us, silhouetted against glass and neon, looked more like ghosts than professionals. No spreadsheets, no titles, just people. People who were a little too lonely, a little too tired, and far too awake to pretend otherwise. And in that moment, something unspoken clicked into place. This wasn't about work anymore. This was about the three of us, drawn together not by deadlines or projects, but by absence, by ache, by whatever it was we couldn't bear to face alone. It was only the beginning. It's strange how quickly the boundaries start to blur when the rules of the daytime world don't apply. In the glow of that office after midnight, surrounded by soft reflections in the glass, we weren't roles anymore. Not the broken husband, not the commanding boss, not the flirty assistant. We were just people. 3 quiet shadows lingering in the only space that didn't judge us for needing to stay. Vivian was the first to break the stillness again. She returned to the couch and kicked her feet up, long legs folded beneath her in a way that would have been scandalous during normal business hours. Her blouse had slipped slightly off one shoulder, and the edge of a black strap peeked out. She didn't seem to care. So, she said, looking over at me, what's your excuse? The real one. Sophie turned toward me too, her expression playful but curious, her head tilted slightly as she toyed with the drawstring of her hoodie, a casual, oversized thing she must have had stashed in her bottom drawer. Somehow, she made it look sensual. Or maybe I was just starved for attention, for something that didn't feel like loss. I stared at my coffee for a moment before answering. My wife cheated, I said simply. Couple weeks ago. Vivian blinked once. Sophie froze mid-movement. I didn't look at them. I just kept my eyes on the swirl of dark liquid in my mug, like if I stared hard enough I could drown in it. I haven't been sleeping much. Or eating. Or functioning, really. I try to go home, but everything there reminds me of her. Her toothbrush still in the holder. Her robe hanging on the back of the bathroom door. The sound of my own breath in a room where she used to laugh. So, I come here. A long silence. Then Vivian spoke, and her voice had dropped low, that velvet tone that usually meant she was about to say something that could end a meeting. But this wasn't a boardroom. I'm sorry, she said. That's a brutal kind of pain. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, she wasn't the woman who'd signed off on my promotion last year. She wasn't the one who once made an intern cry during a performance review. She was just Vivian, a woman who had lived long enough to understand the shape of heartbreak. Sophie leaned forward slowly, her foot brushing mine under the table. The touch was so slight, I almost thought I imagined it. "Was it someone you knew?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. "Her co-worker." She said it started by accident, which I guess is code for I got off on being desired by someone new. Sophie's lips twisted. "Classic. Did she admit it?" Vivian asked. "Oh yeah." With this weird calmness. Like she'd already played the whole conversation in her head 100 times and figured out how to say it without guilt. Said she didn't mean to hurt me. That she just needed to feel alive again. "Jesus," Sophie muttered. Vivian didn't respond. She just sipped her coffee, eyes narrowed in thought. Then, with a tilt of her head, she asked, "And now?" "Now what?" "Now that the world you built with her is crumbling, what are you doing with it?" I gave a dry laugh. "Running. Mostly." "You're here," Sophie said, which is something. The moment hung heavy again, but not in a bad way. In a shared kind of way. And then, surprisingly, Vivian leaned back and said, "It's funny. Everyone thinks I'm married to this job because I'm ambitious. Because I like power." Sophie gave her a sideways look. "You mean you're not?" Vivian rolled her eyes. "Not entirely. I used to be in love. Once. Married young. Made the usual promises. But love turned out to be a lot more fragile than I expected. He couldn't handle me growing into myself. Said I'd changed. And maybe I had. But isn't that the point?" "What happened?" I asked before I could stop myself. "He left," she said. "Found someone younger. Someone who didn't question his choices. That was 10 years ago." "And now?" Sophie asked, her voice softer than usual. Vivian looked out the window. "Now I manage accounts worth millions and go home to a condo that's always clean and always empty. I stopped expecting people to stay. I stopped letting them get close enough to leave." The confession felt like a stone dropped into a pool. A ripple passed between us. Not pity, not sympathy. Something else. Recognition. Then Sophie shifted, pulling her knees up to her chest on the couch, her mug cradled between her hands. Her voice was lighter, teasing again, but it had a crack around the edge, something fragile hidden beneath the sarcasm. "Well, I've never been married," she said, "but I've definitely been used. Guys love a woman who makes them laugh until she says something they don't like. Then suddenly you're too much, or not serious enough." Vivian arched an eyebrow. "And yet you're always smiling. Better than crying," Sophie replied, smirking. I looked between them and felt something shift in my chest. These weren't perfect women. They weren't unknowable, untouchable. They were bruised in their own ways, scarred by years of disappointments and betrayals, just like me. And yet here we were, 3 broken pieces orbiting each other in a space no one else could see. Sophie reached for a file on the table, flipping through it idly, but her voice was softer now. "You know what's weird?" she said. "This office at night, it doesn't feel like the same place. During the day, it's pressure and noise and deadlines. But at night, it's like a separate world. Like nothing outside these walls exists." Vivian gave a quiet nod. At night, we stopped performing. It was true. Even the way Vivian sat now, relaxed, one leg draped casually over the other, was nothing like the woman I knew from 9 to 5. Sophie, too, without the usual speed to her voice, just existing in the stillness with us. I found myself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Eventually, Vivian stood and walked toward the kitchenette. The sound of running water echoed faintly as she rinsed her cup. Sophie moved beside me and leaned in just slightly, close enough for her perfume. Something warm, musky, like sandalwood and burnt sugar, to tease the edge of my senses. "Hey," she said, her voice low. "If you ever want to talk, like more, just us, I don't mind." I turned to look at her, and our eyes locked. There was something unspoken between us, something pulsing just beneath the surface. Not flirtation exactly, but a curiosity laced with electricity. "I might take you up on that," I murmured. She smiled, slow and genuine. Vivian returned with her cup clean and her expression unreadable. "We should get some sleep," she said, though she made no move to leave. I nodded. None of us stood up. Because somewhere between the silence, the confessions, and the shared ache, this place had become more than an office. It had become the only place we felt real. I didn't plan to say it. Not that night, not in that moment. But when Sophie laughed at something I said, really laughed, full-bodied, head back, that warm sound echoing against the empty glass walls, the weight came back like a punch to the chest. I hadn't heard my wife laugh like that in months. Not around me, maybe around him. And suddenly I was drowning in it again. I must have gone quiet, because Sophie tilted her head at me, those sharp green eyes narrowing with concern. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" I opened my mouth, closed it, looked down at my half-empty mug. Vivian, who had been scrolling through something on her tablet, lifted her gaze too. Her face was unreadable, but alert, focused. I swallowed hard. "I lied," I said. My voice barely carried. "The affair didn't happen a couple weeks ago." Sophie shifted on the couch, folding her legs beneath her. Vivian leaned forward, elbows on her knees. They were listening. "It started a few months ago. I only found out 2 weeks ago." I looked down, jaw clenched, then forced the rest of it out. But it had been happening for months. She was fucking someone else while telling me she was just tired. Just stressed. You know how many nights I rubbed her shoulders thinking I was helping her decompress after work, when really I was just warming her up for him? Vivian didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she wanted to. Sophie's expression had lost its playful edge. Her eyes were soft now, mouth slightly parted like she was about to say something, but couldn't find the right words. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. I kept making excuses. I'd see the way she checked her phone and smiled to herself, and I told myself it was a meme. A fucking meme. She stopped initiating sex. Stopped even looking at me. And I blamed myself. "That's what people like that do," Vivian said, her voice low and even. "They starve you of affection, then act like it's your fault you're starving." Sophie nodded beside her. "It's not. You know that, right?" I shrugged. "I do now. But in the moment, it felt like I was the one failing. Like maybe if I worked less, or brought home more flowers, or, I don't know, grew another 2 inches and started doing yoga in the morning like her new guy." That made Sophie snort, despite herself. Vivian, though, kept her eyes on me. "So how did you find out?" I hesitated. There's a kind of intimacy in confession, not romantic, not even sexual, but raw and strange and delicate. Like handing someone your heart still dripping and hoping they don't flinch. I took a breath. She left her laptop open. She never does that. We were having dinner, or I was. She was just pushing her food around. And her phone buzzed, but she ignored it. I heard the ping, and something just, I don't know, snapped. I got up to grab a drink, and there it was. Her email still open. A hotel confirmation. Sophie winced. It was for the next weekend. A spa retreat. 2 guests. I clicked. His name was on the reservation. Vivian sat back slightly, arms crossed. Not defensively, more like anchoring herself. She didn't even bother hiding it. Sophie asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Oh, she hid it. But she got lazy. Or maybe she wanted to be caught. I don't know. But when I asked her about it, she looked me straight in the face and said, 'It's not what it looks like.'" Sophie's face twisted. "Classic. I didn't yell," I said. I wanted to, but I couldn't find the energy. I just kept asking her why. Over and over again. "Why?" Vivian spoke softly. "And did she give you an answer?" She said she needed to feel seen. That he made her feel desired. Like she was still alive. I looked away, eyes burning. As if I hadn't spent the last 10 years proving I wanted her. As if that wasn't enough. No one spoke for a moment. Then Sophie reached out, slowly, deliberately, and placed her hand over mine. The contact was light, careful. Her thumb moved, barely grazing my skin, but the sensation was like fire underwater. Not sexual, not exactly. Just warm. Real. "I'm sorry," she said. Vivian stood and walked to the window. Her reflection stared back at her, distorted slightly by the city lights behind the glass. "I remember when my ex told me he'd met someone else," she said. "We were sitting in our kitchen. He told me over toast. Toast of all things." Her laugh was dry. He said it with this calm, rehearsed voice, like he was reading a customer service script. And I remember thinking, is this really happening? Like my brain couldn't catch up. She turned toward us. "You're not crazy for missing her," she said to me. "Even after what she did. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't kill the love. It just poisons it." Sophie nodded. "And then you hate yourself for still wanting her. Or missing her smell. Or waking up and checking your phone before remembering she's not texting you anymore. I stared at the two of them. These weren't just casual late-night coworkers anymore. They knew. Maybe not my exact pain, but something like it. They'd lived it, carried it, survived it. I haven't told anyone, I admitted. Not my friends. Not my parents. I've just kept it inside. Coming here was the only place I could breathe. Vivian walked back toward her desk and sat again, this time closer. You can talk to us, she said. No judgment. No polite fake empathy. Just truth. Sophie leaned into me again, her shoulder brushing mine. And wine, she added. Eventually. I laughed. Not much, just enough. Enough to feel the knot in my chest loosen a little. Thanks, I said. Vivian smiled, and Sophie grinned. And just like that, the pain didn't feel so heavy anymore. It started with takeout. A week after the night I told them the truth, about her, about the betrayal. I found myself back in the office again past midnight. Not because I had work to do, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I wanted to be there. Because I was beginning to realize that I needed to be there. The office at night had become something sacred. By day, everything still felt stiff, predictable. Vivian returned to her commanding self, clipped, efficient, composed in her fitted suits and red-bottom heels. Sophie, too, played her part perfectly, clicking through spreadsheets and client calls with that disarming, flirtatious professionalism everyone mistook for harmless charm. But after the sun dipped below the skyline, everything changed. The tension relaxed. The walls breathed. The city outside stopped watching. It became ours. That night, I arrived just after 11. I had no plan, just an instinct. My keycard beeped me through the lobby, and when the elevator doors slid open on the 14th floor, the glow from Vivian's office was already waiting for me. Inside, Vivian was perched on the edge of her desk, barefoot again, a pen twirling between her fingers. Sophie sat cross-legged on the couch with her laptop balanced on her thighs, earbuds dangling around her neck, sipping something from a thermos with a lipstick stain on the rim. You're late, Sophie said without looking up. We were starting to think you found a better crowd to avoid your grief with. Vivian arched an eyebrow. Didn't you bring the food? I held up the bag of Thai and smiled. Extra spicy, as requested. That was how it began. Our midnight rituals. Each night, a different meal. Sometimes Chinese, sometimes tacos, sometimes pizza so greasy we needed napkins just to hold the slices. We ate out of paper boxes and foil trays, drinking cheap wine from mismatched mugs we'd borrowed from the break room. No one sat in their usual place. Vivian would sometimes curl up on the floor, back against the couch, legs stretched out and crossed at the ankles. Sophie would prop herself up on the windowsill, knees to her chest, eyes flicking between our faces like a cat basking in conversation. And me? I never sat the same way twice. Sometimes I sprawled out, sometimes I leaned against Vivian's desk, sometimes I just stood with my hands in my pockets, trying not to look like I was feeling everything all at once. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, sure, but also movies, relationships, bad dates, childhood trauma disguised as humor. Sophie once confessed she had been dumped on Valentine's Day during sex. Vivian laughed so hard, she almost spilled wine on the proposal file she was pretending to review. Vivian, in turn, told us about the time she locked herself in a hotel bathroom during a corporate retreat just to avoid an ex who showed up unannounced. I told them about a college girlfriend who left me for her guitar teacher. Sophie demanded photos. I promised her there were none. She didn't believe me. Some nights we played music low through Sophie's speaker, lo-fi beats, jazz, even a little 90s R&B that made Vivian roll her eyes while secretly humming along. And the wine. God, the wine. Sophie brought it in discreet little canvas bags like a college student hiding it from her RA. She had a surprising collection of cheap but decent reds and dry whites with cheeky labels like Liquid Therapy or 3 Sips Later. One night, she brought a bottle called Men Are Trash Merlot, and we all lost it. I'm framing the label, Vivian said, holding it up like an award. I want it tattooed, Sophie added, drunk on both the wine and the freedom of the moment. We drank too much. We laughed too loud. And still, the building kept our secrets. Somewhere around the 3rd week, Vivian started leaving her door open on purpose. I never asked her to. I never said I'd be coming back. But when I arrived at night, it was always open, the light on, the couch ready, the scent of her perfume faint in the air. It was like being invited into a dream where no one had to explain themselves. And the line between professional and personal blurred so gently, so delicately, that I don't think any of us realized it was happening. There was a night, it must have been Thursday, when Sophie fell asleep mid-sentence. We were sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, a container of pad thai between us. She was talking about something, her brother, I think, and then her head just tipped to the side and rested on my shoulder. I froze, not out of discomfort, but because it felt intimate, not romantic, not yet, but warm, natural. Her breath slowed, evened out. Her body softened. She let go, completely, and for a moment, I just sat there holding still, afraid to move and break the spell. Vivian didn't say anything, but I saw her watching from her chair. Her lips parted slightly, her fingers stilled. She didn't look away for a long time. Later, when Sophie stirred and apologized with a drowsy smile, Vivian just said, "We should all try that sometime." "Sleeping at work?" Sophie mumbled. "Letting go," Vivian replied. No one answered, but the room felt full in a way that had nothing to do with food or wine. And every night I left, I felt a little less hollow. Even when the elevator doors closed behind me and the city swallowed me back up, I carried the warmth of that small, strange sanctuary with me, like a secret tucked under my coat. The grief wasn't gone. The betrayal didn't vanish. But in the quiet comfort of that office at midnight, I wasn't just the man she left. I was something else, something forming in the dark. And I wasn't alone anymore. It started with a touch. Nothing dramatic. Just fingers grazing fingers as Sophie passed me a folder I didn't ask for. The warmth of her skin brushing mine, lingering just long enough to feel intentional, or maybe accidental. But it happened again 2 nights later, and again after that. By the time I noticed, I'd stopped pulling away. The office had become our second skin. During the day, we remained buttoned up, professional. Vivian, sharp in her pencil skirts and tailored blazers, ran meetings with the same precision she applied to cutting down bullshit. Sophie, all charm and eye rolls, moved through the halls with her usual confident strut. And I did what I'd always done: nod, listen, contribute, pretend everything was perfectly normal. But by night, the rhythm shifted. It was subtle at first. A glance too long. A pause between sentences that stretched thin. Vivian would stand behind me while I sat at her desk, reading over a spreadsheet, and I'd feel the heat of her breath on the side of my neck. Too close for just business. Sophie started bringing snacks instead of wine, saying she wanted us to remember the nights clearly. But she said it with a smirk, like maybe we all remembered a little too clearly already. One evening, Vivian showed up in a silk blouse unbuttoned just low enough that her collarbone glowed in the office lights. Her lipstick was darker than usual. I told myself not to stare, but I did. And she caught me. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look, something between amusement and challenge, and returned to her laptop like nothing had happened. But something had. Sophie noticed. Of course she did. Nothing got past her. "You too," she said later that night, twisting a strand of her red hair between her fingers. "Have this thing going on." Vivian didn't look up from her notes. "What thing?" Sophie raised an eyebrow. "The thing where you pretend you're not mentally undressing him every time he walks in here." Vivian gave a slow smile, not even bothering to deny it. I opened my mouth, but Sophie cut me off. "And you, Mr. Morally Conflicted, are definitely not as innocent as you look." I didn't say I was. "Please. You eat us up with your eyes." Vivian looked over then. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice came low and deliberate. "Do you?" I should have said no. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I looked at her and said, "Yeah, I do." The room went quiet. Sophie leaned back, arms folded, but her grin didn't fade. "Well," she said softly, "at least someone finally said it." Vivian didn't flinch. She closed her laptop, stood, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The skyline pulsed in the glass like a heartbeat. She stood there in silence for a long moment before speaking. "I used to think I wasn't allowed to want anything that wasn't logical," she said. "Anything that didn't fit neatly into my life. Sex, desire, it was a distraction. Something you squeezed into a Sunday morning before coffee and spreadsheets." Sophie moved toward her, barefoot now, silent on the carpet. "That's not what you want anymore." Vivian turned, slowly. "I don't know what I want anymore." Her eyes found mine. "But I know what I feel. Here. At night." With you too. And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a decision. It was a crack in the wall we'd all been pressing our backs against. Later that same night, Sophie sat beside me on the couch, our legs touching from hip to knee. Vivian had stepped out for a moment to take a call, and the silence between Sophie and me felt electric. "You think this is a game?" she asked, eyes fixed on mine. "No." She leaned in slightly. "Do you want her?" "Yes." She blinked, surprised by the honesty. "Do you want me?" The answer came without hesitation. "Yes." She didn't move. Neither did I. We just sat there, the hum of the city vibrating through the glass, our bodies inches apart, breath shallow. When Vivian returned, she didn't ask what we'd said. She looked between us, nodded once, and poured herself a glass of water like she already knew. After that night, nothing physical happened. Not yet. But the air changed. Every shared glance carried weight. Every touch felt deliberate. Even laughter had tension wrapped inside it. Sophie started brushing my shoulder when she walked past, small touches that lingered. Vivian took to adjusting my tie before she left at night, her fingers slow and precise, her eyes never leaving mine. One night, I was the last to arrive. I walked in to find them both already seated, the lights low, music playing softly from Sophie's speaker, something jazzy and slow. Vivian looked up, lips parted like she was about to say something, but didn't. Instead, she tilted her head and just watched me cross the room. Sophie was barefoot, legs tucked under her, a glass of red wine in her hand. She gave me a lazy smile, like she'd been waiting for me to arrive before the real night could begin. No one said a word. I sat down. And that was it. Nothing happened, not really. But we all felt it. The shift. We were no longer just co-workers hiding from grief. We weren't just broken people sharing wine and silence. We were something else now. Something brimming with tension, possibility, desire. And once those lines blurred, once we let ourselves feel it, there was no turning back. The first time it happened, it was quiet. No gasps, no fireworks, no dramatic music. Just a shift, a quiet surrender in the dark, behind glass walls that reflected more truth than they hid. It was late, later than usual. I remember because Sophie was already half asleep on the couch, curled up in a blanket she'd started keeping in Vivian's office. She'd kicked off her heels somewhere near the filing cabinet and was dozing to the soft hum of a jazz playlist still bleeding from her phone. Vivian stood at the window, sipping from her glass, looking out at the skyline like it had personally betrayed her. She hadn't spoken in minutes, just stood there in that silk blouse she'd worn earlier in the day, sleeves rolled, top button undone, neck exposed. "I used to think glass offices were designed to intimidate," she said finally, her voice low. "To show people how exposed you are, that your mistakes, your weaknesses, your secrets, they couldn't be hidden." I glanced at her from the armchair, legs stretched out, tie loosened. And now, she turned to face me, glass still in hand. "Now I think they're about pretending to be seen, not actually being seen." There was a long pause, the air between us heavy and charged. I stood, walked slowly toward her, the carpet muffling my steps. When I reached her, I didn't speak. I just stood close enough to feel the warmth of her body radiate through the thin barrier of air between us. She didn't move, didn't pull away. Then, quietly, she said, "Do you think we'd be doing this if it weren't for the hour? The pain?" "I don't know," I said. "But we are." And then I touched her, just her hand, fingers first, then her wrist. She didn't flinch. Her pulse thrummed beneath my thumb, steady but fast. She leaned in, just slightly, barely a breath. And I kissed her. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't explosive. It was slow, measured. A kiss not of lust, but of ache, of recognition, of everything unsaid finally given shape. Her lips were soft, wine-warmed. She kissed me back with control, restraint, but the tension coiled beneath it made my chest tighten. When we finally broke apart, she didn't speak. She just looked into my eyes for a long moment, and something passed between us. Then came the click of a glass being set down on the desk. Sophie stood there, her blanket pulled at her feet, eyes wide open, but calm, not surprised, not angry. She crossed the room without speaking. The hem of her t-shirt, something oversized and probably stolen from some long-forgotten ex, brushed against her thighs. She looked from me to Vivian, then back again. "Well," she said, voice low, "that answers that question." Vivian stepped back, just slightly, suddenly unsure. Sophie. But Sophie shook her head. Don't apologize. I'm not a child. She turned to me. Is it just her? I blinked, unsure how to respond. Because, she said, stepping closer, I wasn't blind, you know. I saw the way you looked at me, too. Sophie, I began, but my voice caught. She was right. From the first night, she brushed my hand. The way she leaned on my shoulder, the way she teased and studied me like she was peeling back layers without a scalpel. I'd wanted her. Still wanted her. But I wanted Vivian, too. The silence stretched. Then Sophie reached out and took my other hand. And just like that, I stood between them, one hand in each of theirs. My pulse roared in my ears. This is insane, I said, half laughing. Vivian gave a breathy chuckle, still reeling. Yes, it is. Sophie's smile tilted. But we're not stopping, are we? And we didn't. That night wasn't about sex. Not yet. It was about permission. Permission to touch, to want, to indulge, to exist in a space without explanation. We sat together on the couch, knees brushing, hands trailing fingers, hearts thudding under our skin. Vivian kissed me again, slower this time, with Sophie watching, not jealous, but intrigued. When Sophie kissed me next, it was different, softer, warmer, teasing. There were no rules now. The office became our secret world. At night, we kept the blinds half drawn. The city lights spilled in, framing us in blue and gold and shadow. We spread papers across the floor just to lie on them, laughed into each other's necks, whispered things we'd never dare say by day. It wasn't always both of them at once. Sometimes it was just Sophie, barefoot and giggling as she stole my hoodie and curled into me on the couch, tracing circles on my palm with her finger. Sometimes it was Vivian, pressed close against me at the window, her hand firm on my chest, her voice in my ear saying things that made me burn. But often, it was all three of us. A tangled web of shared touches, stolen kisses, and quiet understanding. Never frantic, never rushed, just full of longing, full of life, full of everything that had been missing since the betrayal. During the day, we pretended nothing had changed. Vivian still led strategy calls with her usual fire. Sophie still rolled her eyes at client feedback. I still answered emails like a man who hadn't been kissed against a glass wall by two women the night before. No one knew. No one could know. But behind those transparent walls, when the office emptied and the world forgot us, we were alive in ways that scared me. Not because it was reckless, but because it felt like the only thing that made sense. By day, the office remained a cathedral of discipline. Suits crisp, voices measured, spreadsheets spotless. Vivian led meetings with her usual steel-edged clarity, all sharp eyes and precise phrasing, never betraying a flicker of the woman who kissed me behind the blinds the night before. Sophie cracked jokes in the break room like always, flipping through files with her trademark smirk, never once letting anyone see the way her hand had trembled when she'd touched my face just hours earlier. And me? I played my role with equal conviction. I nodded in sync. I reviewed proposals. I hit deadlines. I smiled through the hallways like a man who hadn't tasted sin under fluorescent lights. But the nights? They kept getting riskier. It wasn't just about the kisses anymore. It was about the heat, the hunger, the need that had built up like static in every glance, every lingering brush of skin, every moment we waited for the others to leave before locking the door behind us. We started staying later, pushing the limits. 11 turned to midnight. Midnight turned to 2. Some nights, I left just before sunrise, my tie shoved into my pocket, my shirt half wrinkled from fingers that had no business exploring me the way they did. There was a rhythm to it now. Vivian would stay behind in her office, pretending to finish up a last-minute report. Sophie would just happen to be working late too. And me? I'd show up like I didn't already know what was waiting. The dimmed lights, the scent of perfume thick in the air, the glass walls begging us to test their limits again. It wasn't every night that all three of us gave into it. Some nights, it was just Sophie, playful and bold, sliding into my lap with a devilish grin and lips that tasted like cherry chapstick in mischief. Other nights, Vivian would call me in under the guise of a last-minute review, only to close the door and unbutton my shirt while the city lights painted gold over her cheekbones. But the most dangerous nights? Those were the ones we shared. The three of us, tangled in the half-dark, silence pulsing with tension so thick it felt like the air itself might crack. We kept it slow, careful, like we were testing how far the night would let us go before it told someone. The office had become a liminal space, neither real nor fantasy. A cocoon built of spreadsheets and desire. But like all secret worlds, it couldn't last forever. Rumors started swirling. It began as whispers, half-formed in the hallways. A curious glance here. A raised eyebrow there. Someone noticed that Sophie's shifts were aligning suspiciously with Vivian's late nights. Someone else commented on the fact that I'd become awfully productive after hours. No one confronted us. Not yet. But the air during the day started to shift. Colder. Less forgiving. Like the walls themselves were starting to listen. Vivian noticed first. Of course she did. She called me into her office one afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor. She didn't smile. "People are watching," she said simply. I sat down, heart already ticking faster. "I know." Sophie entered a few minutes later, summoned without needing a reason. She slipped into the chair beside me, her tone casual. "We getting caught?" "Not yet," Vivian said. "But the balance is shifting." We sat there, the three of us, in full daylight. No wine. No laughter. Just reality, finally catching up to us. I leaned forward. "Do you want to stop?" Vivian didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, then at Sophie. Her expression unreadable, but not cold. Sophie answered first. "Do you?" I thought about it. About the way Vivian's lips felt against my neck. The sound Sophie made when she laughed with her whole chest. The silence between us that felt more honest than anything I'd shared in my marriage. "No," I said. "I don't." Vivian nodded slowly. "Neither do I." Sophie smirked. "Then let them talk." But even as we said it, I felt the tightrope thinning beneath our feet. One night, the cleaning crew came early. We were in the break room. Vivian pressed against the counter, her shirt half undone, my hand on her thigh. Sophie leaning back against the table, watching us with that sly hunger in her eyes. We heard the door open down the hall and froze, breathless, wild-eyed, like teenagers caught with their hands in something they shouldn't touch. Vivian smoothed her blouse with military precision. Sophie slipped back into her heels. I downed a cold coffee like I'd been working, not wandering fingers across silk. The janitor didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered too long. The next day, Vivian called in a favor and had the cleaning schedule changed. But it was a warning, and still we kept going. Because how could we stop? When everything outside that office felt dull and heavy. When the ache I'd carried from the betrayal had finally been replaced by something alive. They made me feel wanted. Not just for my body, but for my story. My pain. My mess. They saw me. Not through obligation, not out of pity, but with hunger and curiosity and something deeper neither of them dared name. And I saw them too. Vivian, powerful but weary. Always in control, but desperate to be touched without being handled. Sophie, bright and burning. Always laughing but terrified of being left behind. And me, still healing, still unsure, but no longer numb. We weren't just crossing lines anymore. We were redrawing the entire map. She arrived without warning. It was a Tuesday night, maybe 10:30. The office was quiet except for the hum of city traffic far below. Sophie was perched on the windowsill, one leg tucked beneath her, sipping wine from a chipped mug that said, "World's okayest assistant." Vivian was stretched out on the couch, head tilted back, her silk blouse unbuttoned just enough to show the slope of her collarbone, her heels discarded beneath the coffee table. I was somewhere in the middle of it, literally and emotionally, sitting on the edge of Vivian's desk, watching the two of them, trying to ignore the burn of longing I'd come to crave. We weren't doing anything yet, but we were about to. I could feel it. The shift in the air, the slow curl of anticipation that always preceded touch. Then the elevator dinged. We all froze. No one else was supposed to be there. Sophie glanced at the door, her eyes narrowing. "Did you leave the security gate unlocked?" I hadn't. I was sure of it. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heels, purposeful and sharp. A silhouette passed by the frosted glass of the conference room. Vivian stood quickly, buttoning her blouse. Who the hell? The door burst open. And there she was, my wife, hair tied up like she used to when she wanted to look effortlessly sexy. A designer coat draped over her shoulders, eyes wild and scanning the room. She looked good, better than she had any right to. But beneath the polished exterior, I saw it, the crack in her composure. "Are you fucking serious?" she hissed, stepping inside like she owned the place. Sophie slowly slipped off the windowsill, setting her mug down without breaking eye contact. Vivian didn't move. She crossed her arms and narrowed her gaze. "Excuse me." My wife ignored her. Her attention was fixed on me, jaw tight, lips trembling with rage. "This is what you've been doing? While I've been calling, texting, apologizing, you've been screwing around with them." I blinked. "You broke into my office. You haven't responded to a single message in over a week." I didn't want to. Vivian stepped forward then, voice cold and razor sharp. "You're not supposed to be here." My wife turned on her. "And who the hell are you?" "His boss." "And you?" Her eyes cut to Sophie, who smiled sweetly and raised a hand. "Just the assistant. Sometimes." "You're both disgusting," she spat. I laughed. It was involuntary, the kind of laugh that escapes when tension snaps inside your chest. "You cheated on me," I said. "Remember? You fucked your coworker for months, and now you want to come in here and play the victim because I finally stopped bleeding for you?" She blinked, as if slapped. "I came here to try and fix things." "No," I said calmly. "You came here to make sure I was still broken." Vivian moved to stand beside me. Not touching, just there. A quiet wall of support. Sophie stayed back, leaning on the edge of the table, watching with sharp eyes and a slight smirk. My wife's voice cracked. "You look happy." "I am. With them." I glanced between Vivian and Sophie. Vivian, who had seen the ugliest parts of me and never flinched. Sophie, who pulled laughter from my ribs when I thought I'd forgotten how. "Yes," I said. "With them." She looked like she might cry, but I couldn't tell if it was from pain or embarrassment. Her mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head. "This isn't you," she whispered. I stepped forward then, slow and steady. "You're right. This isn't who I was. But it's who I've become. You burned the life we had to the ground. And I finally stopped standing in the ashes waiting for you to come back." Silence stretched thick across the room. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. The elevator dinged again moments later, and she was gone. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, adrenaline buzzing through my limbs. Vivian touched my arm. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." Sophie moved beside me. "You didn't even flinch." I think I finally ran out of things to feel for her. We stood there in that quiet. And then Vivian spoke, softly. "She expected to find you destroyed. Alone," Sophie added. "Instead, she walked in on something real." I turned to them both. "I didn't plan for this," I said. "For you." Vivian stepped closer. "Neither did we." Sophie grinned. "But here we are." And as the city lights spilled through the window, bathing us in gold and shadow, I realized something. She had lost the power to hurt me. Not because I'd moved on, but because I'd finally remembered who the hell I was and what I deserved. She didn't text. She didn't call. After that night, the night she stormed into my office expecting to find me shattered and instead found me held by the arms of two women who no longer whispered behind her back, my wife vanished. Not physically. She still existed in the world, still logged into our shared bank accounts, and probably cried to our mutual friends, spinning her version of things. But to me, she was gone, and I didn't chase her. That was the shift. Not the kind that comes with loud declarations or slammed doors, but the quiet kind. The kind that creeps in and rewrites the laws of gravity beneath your feet. A month ago, her silence would have wrecked me. Now it felt like freedom. I didn't explain myself. Not to her. Not to anyone. I didn't need to. Because when I came into the office the next morning, wearing the same shirt from the night before, hair still mussed from fingers that didn't belong to her, Vivian greeted me with a knowing glance. She was already in a meeting, poised and cool, nodding at spreadsheets while her heel tapped beneath the conference table. But when our eyes met, just for a second, I saw it. Pride. And Sophie? She passed me in the hallway, handed me a folder, and whispered, "You looked powerful last night." That stuck with me. You look powerful. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about replacing one hurt with another. It was about reclaiming something. Stepping out from under her shadow, the one that had shaped every breath I took since the betrayal. And the truth? It wasn't just about her anymore. The nights in the office became something else. Still electric. Still thick with tension. But different. More deliberate. Vivian no longer left her door cracked open. Now, she left it wide. Sophie stopped pretending to sneak in wine bottles. She brought real glasses now. Stemmed. Elegant. She even lit candles one night. Vanilla and cedarwood, flickering low and golden against the steel and glass. The three of us no longer stumbled into intimacy like a secret we weren't supposed to touch. We claimed it. Vivian would kiss me slow, like she was memorizing the taste of a new chapter. Sophie would laugh into my shoulder, hands slipping beneath my shirt with playful reverence, as if every inch of my skin told a story she wanted to learn by touch. And me? I stopped questioning it. I let myself want them. Both. I let myself be wanted. One night, after Sophie fell asleep curled in my lap, breath warm against my thigh, Vivian leaned in and said, "You realize this can't last forever, right?" I nodded. I know. Her fingers threaded through mine. But that doesn't mean it's not real. And it was real. In the way fire is real. In the way quiet is real after weeks of noise. In the way truth feels in your chest when it stops trying to hide. The power shifted not because I found new lovers, but because I found a new version of me. One that didn't beg to be seen. One that didn't try to win back the love of someone who discarded me like a used coat. One that stood still and strong in the mirror and finally said, "Enough." Rumors spread in the office. Of course they did. People noticed the late nights. The wine glasses that sometimes didn't make it back to the cabinet. The way Sophie laughed a little louder when I entered a room. The way Vivian's gaze lingered just a beat too long when she handed me a report. But no one said a word. Because the thing about power is, once you own it, people stop trying to take it. It radiates off you. Vivian's peers started treating me differently. Not with suspicion, with respect. Suddenly, I was invited into meetings I'd once been excluded from. My ideas weren't just heard, they were implemented. Sophie, too, seemed to flourish. Her confidence sharpened. Her stride gained a rhythm that made heads turn. She'd wink at me during presentations, lips curled just enough to make my heart skip without breaking stride. We hadn't defined anything. There were no titles. No "what are we" conversations. But it didn't feel fragile anymore. It felt like choice. Like ownership. Then, one afternoon, I passed by the receptionist's desk and heard the tail end of a whispered conversation between two junior analysts. My name. Vivian's. Sophie's. A suggestion. A smirk. I didn't flinch. I simply smiled. Because they could speculate all they wanted. They didn't know what we built. They hadn't seen me broken. They hadn't watched me claw my way back from the hollow place she left me in. Vivian found me in the break room later that day, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. "You're handling the gossip well. I've got nothing to be ashamed of." She smiled. "Good. Because I think people finally see you." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "I think I finally see me." She stepped closer, her voice dropping low. "And what do you see?" I looked at her and thought of Sophie, waiting in her office with that same smirk that had gotten me through so many nights. "I see a man who stopped apologizing for wanting more." She leaned in, kissed me once, gently, and whispered, "Then take it." I filed the papers on a Thursday morning. No drama, no confrontation, just a clean, silent transaction in a quiet government building where the fluorescent lights hummed over tired clerks and lukewarm coffee. I stood there, pen in hand, staring at the signature line for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to feel the moment settle in my bones. This is it, I thought. The last piece. I signed my name, slid the papers forward, and walked out into the sunlight. For the first time in over a year, the air didn't feel heavy. No ghosts. No echoes of what could have been. Just the faint breeze across my skin and the solid rhythm of my own feet on the sidewalk. I didn't look back. I didn't text her. I didn't wonder how she'd react when the envelope arrived. She made her choice. And now, I had made mine. Back at the office, everything looked the same. Clean desks, blinking monitors, the low murmur of keyboards tapping out their rhythm. But for me, something was different. I no longer needed the building the way I once did. I used to hide in it. Sleep at my desk just to avoid the emptiness of the apartment. Bury myself in emails so I wouldn't feel the silence she left behind. But now I chose it. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because this was where I began again. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see them. Vivian was already in her office when I arrived. She wore dark slacks and a white blouse, sleeves rolled, collar open. She didn't ask why I was there. She just looked at me, eyes soft. Is it done? I nodded. Filed this morning. She walked to the bar cart she kept hidden behind the bookshelf and poured 2 glasses of something amber and smooth. No words. No speeches. Just quiet respect. We clinked glasses. To freedom, she said. To beginning again, I replied. We drank. Sophie arrived a little after 10. She burst through the door like she always did, wind in her hair, eyes bright, holding a bag of takeout like it was treasure. Okay, hear me out, she said before even saying hello. They just opened this Thai Mexican fusion place down the street, and it is either genius or a war crime. I laughed. Vivian rolled her eyes. But Sophie stopped mid-step when she saw my face. You look different. I feel different. She set the bag down and crossed the room, eyes studying mine. Did you? It's done, I said. And then, without hesitation, she kissed me. It wasn't playful this time. Not teasing. It was real. Her hands in my hair, her body pressed close, her lips warm and firm and full of something like relief. Like certainty. When we broke apart, I turned to Vivian. She didn't look surprised. She simply walked forward, took my face in both hands, and kissed me too. It was slower, deeper. A kiss that said, I saw you at your lowest and stayed anyway. When we sat down, it wasn't rushed. No desperation. No secret glances at the door. We didn't need to pretend anymore. We were no longer running from anything. Not from pain, not from shame, not from guilt. The triangle we'd tiptoed around for weeks had balanced itself. There were no titles. No rules. Just us. 3 people who had found comfort where we didn't expect it. Who had built something fragile and strange and beautiful between the cracks of what life had broken. I moved out of the apartment 2 days later. Didn't take much. Just a couple suitcases, my laptop, and the handful of things that still felt like mine. I left the wedding photos in the drawer. I didn't need them. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Vivian offered me her guest room until I figured things out. Sophie said I'd last 2 nights before ending up in one of their beds. She was wrong. I didn't last even one. By the end of the week, the apartment was filled with laughter, wine bottles, and the tangled warmth of something unspoken but deeply understood. There were no promises, no ultimatums, just shared space and quiet trust. And sex. God, yes. But not just sex. Connection. Vivian's touch was confident, calculated, but when she let herself fall into it, she surrendered like someone who didn't get to often. Sophie was the opposite. Chaotic, hungry, constantly surprising me with the way she touched and tasted and laughed against my skin. Together, we learned the shape of each other's pain. And still, the office remained sacred. We didn't flaunt it. We didn't slip up. Whatever happened in the dark stayed there, not out of shame, but because we knew not everyone would understand. This was ours. One morning, I arrived before them. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the polished floors. I stood by the window, sipping coffee, watching the city stretch awake. For a second, I thought about who I used to be. The man who lay in bed next to a woman who wouldn't touch him. The man who blamed himself. The man who stood in front of a hotel confirmation with his own name nowhere on it. That man was gone. What remained was someone forged by fire, not burned, but reshaped. Behind me, I heard the door open. Soft footsteps. A hand on my back. Sophie. A moment later, another hand. Vivian. We stood there together, watching the world light up below us, the city gleaming in gold. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't miss her. I didn't hurt. I didn't ache. I was simply whole.